I arrived at my own son's wedding, and when I gave my name, the staff looked at me with confusion. I wasn't on the list. I searched for Ethan among the guests, and when I asked him about it, he rolled his eyes and told me with contempt, "Did you really think you would be invited?" I smiled calmly, told him I understood perfectly, and left. But in the middle of the ceremony, his phone began to ring non-stop. "My name is Raymond. I am 71 years old. And that day, I understood that I had raised a monster. For decades, I dedicated myself completely to that boy. I adopted him when he was just 3 years old, an abandoned child I found crying in an orphanage. I gave him my last name, my home, my entire life. I worked double shifts to send him to the best private schools. I gave up my own dreams so that he could achieve his. When he graduated with his engineering degree, I cried with happiness, thinking it had all been worth it. But I never imagined that the same son I loved so dearly would cast me out like a stray dog on the most important day of his life. Brooke, his fiancée, had been the architect of it all. From the moment she appeared in our lives, she began to poison his mind against me. "Your father is too clingy," she would tell him. "A man his age should have his own life and not always be hovering over us." Ethan would listen to her and nod like a puppet. Little by little, the visits became less frequent, the calls colder, the excuses more elaborate. The first time Brooke disrespected me, Ethan said nothing. We were having dinner at my house when she commented that my food was too salty, and that she didn't understand how Ethan could have grown up eating such garbage. I froze, waiting for my son to defend me, but he just kept eating as if nothing had happened. Then came the more subtle humiliations. "Ray, don't you think that shirt is a bit too young for you?" Brooke would say with a fake smile, or when I would arrive to visit him without calling first. "Oh, Raymond, I wish you had called ahead. We're busy planning our future." And Ethan always nodded, always supported her. But what hurt the most was when they announced their engagement. They organized a family dinner, and I was the last to find out. I arrived at Ethan's house expecting a normal dinner and found Brooke showing off a huge ring surrounded by her parents and siblings. "Surprise!" they all shouted. I forced a smile and congratulated them, but inside something broke. "Dad," Ethan told me that night, his tone different, colder, more distant. "Brooke and I have been talking about the wedding. We want something intimate, just close family." I nodded, thinking I was included in that category. How naive I was. The following weeks were an ordeal. Brooke was in charge of the preparations, and every time I asked something about the ceremony, she gave me vague answers. "We're still deciding," she'd say. "We'll let you know." But they never let me know anything. 3 days before the wedding, I called Ethan to ask what time I should arrive at the venue. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Dad," he finally said, "Brooke and I have decided that the wedding will be for only the closest family." I felt as if I had been stabbed. "But Ethan," I said with a trembling voice, "I am your father." "I know," he replied, "but Brooke feels that, well, that you don't fit the image we want to project." I didn't fit their image. Those words echoed in my head for days. The man who had sacrificed everything for him, who had worked to the point of exhaustion to give him a decent life, who had given up love and my own dreams, did not fit their image. But I decided to go anyway. I put on my best suit, the one I had bought thinking of his wedding. I did my hair and took a taxi to the venue. I thought that maybe upon seeing me there, Ethan would have a change of heart, that he would remember everything we had been through together. All the nights I stayed awake when he was sick, all the sacrifices I made. I couldn't have been more wrong. When I arrived at the venue and gave my name at the reception, the staff checked the list once, twice, 3 times. "I'm sorry, sir, but your name isn't on here," the receptionist told me with an uncomfortable smile. "There must be a mistake," I insisted. "I'm Ethan's father." It was then that I saw him approaching, elegant in his tuxedo, with that smile I knew so well. "Dad, what are you doing here?" he asked me, but his tone wasn't one of surprise, it was one of annoyance. "Ethan, son, I came to your wedding," I told him. "My name isn't on the list, but it must be a mistake." He looked at me with a coldness I had never seen before. "It's not a mistake, Dad. I told you it was for close family only. But I am your family, I pleaded. I am your father. Ethan sighed and rolled his eyes. Did you really think you were going to be invited after everything you've done? Those words hit me like a punch. Everything I've done, Ethan? I gave you everything. Exactly, he said with contempt. Always giving, always smothering, always meddling in my life. Brooke is right. You never knew your place. At that moment, Brooke arrived radiant in her wedding dress, and when she saw me, her smile froze. What is he doing here? She asked Ethan as if I were invisible. He's just leaving, he replied without looking at me. Right, Dad? I could have started crying. I could have pleaded. I could have made a scene. But instead I smiled, a calm, serene smile that unsettled them both. I understand perfectly, I told them. Have a beautiful wedding. And I left. But as I walked towards the exit, I took out my phone and dialed a number. Samuel, I said when he answered, I think it's time to execute the plan we discussed. Samuel had been my lawyer for over 20 years, the only one who knew all my secrets. Are you sure, Raymond? He asked me with a worried voice. Once we do this, there's no going back. Completely sure, I replied as I got into the taxi. Ethan just showed me that I'm worthless to him. It's time for him to learn what he's really going to lose. As the taxi drove away from the venue, my phone began to vibrate with messages. But they weren't from Ethan asking where I was or apologizing for what had happened. They were from Brooke, furious that I had shown up at her wedding. How dare you show up without an invitation? You have no dignity, one of her messages read. Ethan is upset with you. I hope you're happy for ruining our special day. Ruining their special day. That woman truly believed that my 5-minute presence had ruined anything. She had no idea what it really meant to ruin something, but she was about to learn very soon. I arrived home, and for the first time in months, I felt strangely calm. For years, I had been walking on eggshells, trying not to bother Ethan, not to inconvenience Brooke, to be the perfect father-in-law who doesn't meddle but is always there when needed. But that night, as I took off the suit I had bought for a wedding I wasn't invited to, I made the most important decision of my life. I was retiring, not from work. I was retiring from being a father. Ethan never knew the truth about my financial situation. When I adopted him, I was a young man working as an office clerk and living in a small apartment. He grew up seeing my sacrifices, my part-time jobs, my constant struggle to make ends meet. What I never told him was that during all those years, my father, who had moved to Europe in the 50s, had been wisely investing the money he earned from his import-export business. When my father died 10 years ago, he left me a considerable inheritance. Properties in Geneva, stocks in prosperous companies, bank accounts that Ethan could never have imagined existed. But I decided to keep living as I always had, working, saving, keeping the same modest house. I wanted Ethan to value me for who I was, not for what I had. What a huge mistake I had made. That very night, while Ethan and Brooke were celebrating their wedding, I was on my computer transferring money, making calls, setting in motion a plan I had been considering for months. The next day, when they woke up from their express honeymoon, their world had begun to change. At first it was subtle. Ethan called me 3 days after the wedding, not to apologize, but to ask me to look after his apartment while he and Brooke were in Cancun. Dad, I need you to go water the plants and pick up the mail, he said as if nothing had happened. Oh, and Brooke wants you to clean up a bit because we're having visitors when we get back. I can't, I replied simply. What do you mean you can't? He asked, surprised. I'm busy, I told him. Find someone else. And I hung up. An hour later, Brooke was screaming at me over the phone. What's wrong with you, Raymond? Are you crazy? It's the least you can do after the scene you made at our wedding. I didn't make a scene, I responded calmly. I just went to congratulate my son. Your son doesn't want you there, she yelled. Get it through your head. You are a burden to him. A burden. After everything I had done, after all the sacrifices, I was a burden. You're right, Brooke, I told her. I am a burden. That's why I've decided to free him from that burden forever. What do you mean by that? She asked, her voice changing tone. I mean, I'm retiring. Ethan no longer has a father. I hung up the phone and turned it off. It was time to start my new life. The next day, I hired a moving company and packed my most important things. The rest I donated to charity. I sold my modest house in the neighborhood where I had raised Ethan and moved into a 5-star hotel in the city center. Not because I couldn't buy another house, but because I wanted time to decide exactly what I was going to do with the rest of my life. Samuel visited me at the hotel that first week. "Raymond, are you sure you want to do this?" he asked as he reviewed the papers I had given him. "I've been sure since the moment Ethan looked at me with contempt at the door of that venue," I replied. "That boy thinks I'm a poor, pathetic old man who depends on him. It's time for him to know the truth." The papers Samuel held in his hands were property transfer documents, bank statements, and something Ethan had never seen: the deed to the house he lived in. The house he thought he had bought with his mortgage was actually purchased by me. I had paid the down payment, I had co-signed the loan, I had been silently paying the mortgage for years so he could maintain his standard of living. But that wasn't all. The company where Ethan worked as an engineer also had a secret. The owner, Mr. Harrison, was a business partner of my father's from Europe. When Ethan graduated, I had spoken to Mr. Harrison to give my son a chance. Not only did he get him the job, but for years he had been receiving reports on his performance. Ethan was a mediocre employee who had kept his job more because of my influence than his talent. Brooke also had no idea who she had really married. Her brand new husband, the successful engineer she bragged so much about, was actually the adopted son of a man who could buy and sell her entire family without blinking. While they were enjoying their honeymoon, spending the wedding gift money from Brooke's family, I was at the hotel spa, relaxing for the first time in decades. It had been years since I had allowed myself this kind of luxury. I had always been so busy working for Ethan, worrying about Ethan, living for Ethan, that I had forgotten to live for myself. It was during a relaxing massage that I made my next decision. Not only was I going to retire from being a father, but I was also going to make sure that Ethan and Brooke understood exactly what they had lost. When Ethan and Brooke returned from their honeymoon, the problems began. First, it was the utility company that cut off their electricity because they hadn't paid the bill. Ethan called me furious. "Dad, why didn't you pay the electricity bill for my house?" "Because it's not my house," I replied calmly, "and because I am no longer your dad." "What are you talking about? Of course you're my dad." "No," I said. "Fathers are invited to their sons' weddings. I was not invited. Therefore, I am not your father." Ethan was silent for a moment. "Dad, don't be ridiculous. It was just a wedding." "Exactly," I replied. "Just a wedding, the most important wedding of your life, and you decided I had no place in it. Now you live with the consequences of that decision." "But you've always paid my utilities," he shouted. "It's your obligation." "My obligation?" I repeated, feeling the anger rise in my chest. "Ethan, for 28 years, I fulfilled obligations that were not mine. That's over." I hung up and dialed Mr. Harrison's number. "Good morning, Mr. Harrison," I said. "It's Raymond. I think it's time we talked about Ethan." "Ah, Raymond," Mr. Harrison sighed. "I figured you'd be calling soon. I heard about what happened at the wedding. That boy has no idea what you've done for him all these years." "That's exactly why I'm calling," I said. "I want you to see who Ethan really is as an employee without my influence." Mr. Harrison was quiet for a moment. "Raymond, if I withdraw my protection, Ethan is going to have serious problems in the company. His work is mediocre. He's constantly late, and several clients have complained about his attitude." "Then handle the situation as it should be handled," I replied. "I will no longer intercede for him." Meanwhile, Brooke had begun to notice other changes. The credit card she used for her shopping sprees for clothes and beauty products had been canceled. It was a card I had taken out years ago and had been paying silently so that Ethan could keep his girlfriend and later wife happy. When Brooke tried to use it at her favorite boutique, the saleswoman told her the card had been reported as canceled for non-payment. "Ethan!" Brooke screamed that night. "Your father canceled my credit card. Call him right now and tell him to reactivate it." Ethan called me in a rage. "Dad, how can you be so petty? Brooke needs that card." "Brooke can get her own card," I replied, "or you can get one for her with your credit." "Oh, wait. You don't have any credit because you've never paid for anything yourself." "You're a bitter old man," he yelled at me. "That's why nobody loves you." His words hurt, but this time I didn't stay silent. "Ethan," I said in a firm voice, "for 28 years I swallowed my pride so you could have everything you wanted. I humbled myself, worked to exhaustion, and gave up my own happiness. And when the most important moment of your life came, you treated me like trash. Now you're going to learn what it means to stand on your own 2 feet." I hung up and turned off my phone. It was time for the next step. The next day, I visited Ethan at his work. I arrived in a luxury car service, dressed in an elegant suit I had bought that morning. When I entered the office, everyone stared at me. Ethan came out of his cubicle with a surprised look on his face. "Dad, what are you doing here?" "I came to talk to you," I said. "Can we speak in private?" We went to the conference room and I closed the door. "Ethan," I said, "I want you to know something. For all these years, Mr. Harrison has been very patient with you because he respects me. But that patience has run out." "What are you talking about?" he asked nervously. "I'm talking about the fact that Mr. Harrison knows you're late, that your work is mediocre, that several clients have complained about you. The only thing that has kept you in this job has been my influence." Ethan turned pale. "That's not true, is it?" I took out my phone and dialed Mr. Harrison's number. "Mr. Harrison, could you please come to the conference room? My son has some questions about his job performance." 5 minutes later, Mr. Harrison entered the room with a folder in his hands. "Good morning, Ethan," he said in a serious voice. "Your father asked me to show you this." He opened the folder and took out several documents. "These are the reports from your supervisors for the last 3 years. It says here you've been late 43 times. You've submitted projects with significant errors, and 3 major clients specifically requested that you not work on their accounts again." Ethan looked at the papers, unable to believe what he was seeing. But they never said anything to me. "Because your father asked me to be patient with you," Mr. Harrison continued. "He has been quietly paying for your mistakes, apologizing to clients, even financially compensating the company for the losses you've caused." "That's a lie," Ethan whispered. "It's not a lie," I told him. "For years, I've been cleaning up your messes because I thought one day you would become the man I wanted you to be. But I was wrong. You are already the man you were going to be, the one who treats his father like trash." Mr. Harrison closed the folder. "Ethan, as a personal favor to your father, I'm going to give you 2 weeks to find another job. After that, your employment here is terminated." He stood up and left, leaving us alone. Ethan looked at me with pleading eyes. "Dad, please, you can't do this. Brooke is going to kill me if I lose my job." "You should have thought of that before you kicked me out of your wedding," I replied. "Now you're going to learn what it means to lose what you value most." I stood up to leave, but Ethan grabbed my arm. "Wait, you can't do this. I'm your son." "No," I said, pulling my arm away. "My son would have defended his father when his wife insulted him. My son would have invited me to his wedding. My son would have treated me with respect. You are not my son, Ethan. You are a stranger living in a house I paid for with a job I got for him, married to a woman who despises him as much as he despises me." I walked out of the office, and for the first time in years, I felt completely free. That night, Ethan arrived home completely shattered. Brooke was waiting for him with a glass of wine in her hand, ready to hear about his day. But when she saw his face, she knew something was wrong. "What's wrong with you?" she asked. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Worse," Ethan replied, slumping onto the couch. "I saw my father turn into my worst nightmare." He told her everything that had happened at the office. The performance reports, the threat of being fired, the revelation that I had been paying for his mistakes for years. Brooke listened with growing horror. "Are you telling me your father has been controlling your job this whole time?" "It wasn't control," Ethan mumbled. "It was protection." "It was manipulation," Brooke shouted. "That man is a psychopath. First he ruins our wedding, and now he wants to ruin your career." But for the first time, Ethan wasn't so sure his father was the villain of the story. His entire life, I had been there, solving his problems, paying his bills, opening doors he thought he had opened himself, and he had kicked me out of his wedding as if I were an intruder. "Brooke," he said slowly, "maybe we should apologize to him." "Apologize?" Brooke jumped to her feet. "Ethan, that man is blackmailing you. He's manipulating you to make you feel guilty." "It's not blackmail," Ethan replied. "It's a consequence. I told him he didn't fit our image, and now he's showing us that we're the ones who don't fit in his." Brooke couldn't believe what she was hearing. "I can't believe you're defending him after what he did to you today." "What he did to me?" Ethan looked at her with tired eyes. "Brooke, what he did was open my eyes. For years I've been living a lie, believing I was successful on my own merit, when in reality I was successful because of his sacrifice." That conversation was the beginning of the end for many things. Brooke could not accept that her successful husband was actually a mediocre man supported by his father-in-law. She had bragged for months about Ethan's job, his abilities, his bright future. What was she going to tell her friends now? That she had married a failure? Meanwhile, I was in my hotel suite having room service for dinner and watching the news. My phone had been ringing all afternoon, but I kept it on silent. I knew it was Ethan and Brooke, probably desperate, probably furious, probably pleading. But I had learned something important. When someone shows you who they really are, you should believe them. The next morning, Samuel came to visit me with more papers. "Raymond," he said, "I have the transfers ready. Are you sure you want to do this?" In my hands, I held the documents to transfer the ownership of Ethan's house to my name, cancel all the automatic payments I had been making for him, and withdraw my co-signature from all his loans. "Completely sure," I replied. "That boy wants independence. Well, he's going to get complete independence." I signed all the papers, and Samuel left to process the transfers. In 24 hours, Ethan was going to discover that the house he lived in was no longer his, that his credit cards had been canceled, and that he had to start paying a rent he couldn't afford with the job he was about to lose. But I had a bigger plan. It wasn't enough for Ethan to learn his lesson. I also wanted Brooke to understand who she had messed with. That woman had spent months insulting me, looking down on me, treating me as if I were a bothersome and worthless old man. It was time for her to learn what my real value was. That afternoon, I dressed in my best suit and took a taxi to the boutique where Brooke worked as a sales associate. It was an expensive store in the most exclusive mall in the city, the kind of place where she felt important because she attended to wealthy women. What Brooke didn't know was that I was wealthier than most of her clients. I entered the store like any other customer and started looking at the clothes. Brooke was helping another woman, but when she saw me, her face changed completely. "What are you doing here?" she asked in a hostile voice. "I came to buy clothes," I answered calmly. "Isn't this your job to help customers?" The other client looked at us, confused by Brooke's aggressive tone. "Do you know this gentleman?" she asked. "He's my father-in-law," Brooke replied with contempt. "One who doesn't know his place." "Oh," I said, smiling. "Then I do know my place. My place is that of a man with money who wants to spend it. Are you going to help me, or do I need to speak with your manager?" Brooke turned red with rage, but she couldn't make a scene in front of other customers. "What do you want?" she asked through gritted teeth. "I want to see that suit in the window," I said, pointing to the most expensive one in the store. "The $6,000 one." Brooke's eyes widened. "$6,000? Are you deaf?" "Yes, $6,000. Do you think I can't afford it?" Brooke went to get the suit, muttering insults under her breath. When she returned, she showed it to me with a look of annoyance. "Here it is," she said, "but I doubt you can afford it." I took out my platinum credit card and handed it to her. "Charge it," I said. "And while you process the payment, I want you to know something." Brooke took the card and walked to the cash register. When she swiped the card, the system not only approved the purchase, but also showed a credit limit that left her speechless. "How?" she started to say. "How can a poor old man like me have a card like this?" I finished her sentence. "Very easily, Brooke. It turns out I'm not poor. I never was." I took out my phone and showed her the screen of my banking app. Brooke looked at the numbers and turned pale. "This can't be real," she whispered. "Do you see that number?" I asked, pointing to my bank balance. "That's just one of my accounts. I have properties in Geneva, stocks in several companies, and more money than you'll ever earn in your entire life working in this store." Brooke handed me back the card with trembling hands. "Why did you never say anything?" "Because I wanted Ethan to value me for who I am, not for what I have," I replied. "But you both showed me that to you, I am worth nothing. So, I decided to show you what you're really going to lose." I took my bag with the suit and headed for the exit. But before I left, I turned back to Brooke. "Oh, and one more thing. Ethan is going to lose his job next week, and the house you live in is no longer yours, so I hope you have some savings because you're going to need them." I left the store, leaving Brooke paralyzed behind the counter. That night, Brooke came home trembling with rage and confusion. Ethan was in the living room drinking a beer and watching television, trying to forget the horrible day he'd had at work. "Ethan," Brooke shouted from the doorway, "your father was at my work today." Ethan turned off the television and faced her. "What? What for?" "To humiliate me," Brooke replied, throwing her purse on the floor. "He bought a $6,000 suit just to prove to me that he has money." Ethan frowned. "$6,000? Brooke, my dad is a retired clerk. He doesn't have $6,000 to spend on a suit." "That's what we thought," Brooke shouted. "But he showed me his bank account, Ethan. He has millions. Millions!" Ethan fell silent, processing what he had just heard. "That's impossible," he murmured. I know my father's financial situation. He's always been a middle-class man. She lied to you, Brooke snapped. For years she made you believe he was poor to manipulate you. He's a sociopath. But Ethan was remembering things he had never questioned before. His father had always had the exact amount of money for emergencies. When Ethan had appendicitis in college, I appeared with the money for the private surgery. When he wanted to buy his car, I had the money for the down payment. When he needed a suit for graduation, I gifted it to him without any trouble. Brooke, he said slowly, I don't think my father ever lied to us about his money. We simply never asked. What do you mean we never asked? Brooke looked at him as if he were crazy. Ethan, you lived with that man your whole life. Exactly, Ethan replied. I lived with him my whole life, and I was never really interested in getting to know him. I never asked him about his family, about his past, about his finances. I just assumed he existed to serve me. That revelation hit them both like a bucket of cold water. Brooke realized she had married a man who didn't really know his own father, and Ethan realized he had despised a man who had kept important secrets for decades. The next day, Ethan decided to go look for me at the hotel. When he arrived at the reception and asked for Raymond, the concierge looked him up and down with contempt. Are you a relative of the gentleman? He asked. I'm his son, Ethan replied. Ah, the concierge said with a cold smile. The son who didn't invite him to his wedding, the gentleman told us. Ethan turned red with embarrassment. Can I speak with him? The gentleman left specific instructions that he does not want to receive visits from his family, the concierge informed him. But I can deliver a message if you like. Ethan wrote a quick note, apologizing and begging for a chance to talk. The concierge took it and disappeared into the elevator. 5 minutes later, he returned with the same note. The gentleman says, You already had your chance to talk to him, and you wasted it at the door of the wedding venue. There will not be a second chance. Ethan left the hotel feeling more lost than ever. Meanwhile, I was in my suite talking on the phone with Mr. Harrison. How has Ethan been at work? I asked him. Raymond, Mr. Harrison sighed. The boy is a wreck. He's late, makes constant mistakes, and yesterday a client complained because Ethan broke down crying during a presentation. Crying? I asked, surprised. Yes, Mr. Harrison confirmed. They asked him something about the project costs, and he started crying, saying he didn't know anything anymore, that his whole life had been a lie. For a moment, I felt a small pang in my chest. Despite everything, Ethan was still the boy I had raised, the one who cried when he got hurt and came running into my arms. But then I remembered his face of contempt when he kicked me out of his wedding, and the pain turned into determination. Mr. Harrison, I said, stick to your decision. Ethan needs to learn that actions have consequences. That same week, Ethan and Brooke received the legal notice about the house. A lawyer arrived at their door with papers proving that the property had been fully transferred to my name and that they had 30 days to vacate or start paying a monthly rent of $3,000. Brooke read the documents and became hysterical. This is impossible. The house is ours. We have the deed. Apparently not, Ethan told her in a dull voice. Apparently my father has been paying for this house for years, and I never knew. Brooke started screaming at him that he was useless. How could he not know his own father owned his house? How could he be so blind? She raged that she had married a failure. Her screams became so intense that the neighbors called the police for a domestic disturbance. When the officers arrived, they found Brooke breaking plates and furniture while Ethan was huddled in a corner crying. Ma'am, one of the police officers said to Brooke, you need to calm down or we're going to have to arrest you for disturbing the peace. You can't arrest me? Brooke screamed. This is my house. According to these documents, the officer said, reviewing the legal papers, this house belongs to a gentleman named Raymond. Are you Raymond? He's my father-in-law, Brooke snapped. Then this is not your house, the officer concluded. I suggest you resolve this matter in a civilized way, or we will be forced to intervene. After the police left, Ethan and Brooke sat among the broken plates and overturned furniture. What are we going to do? Brooke whispered. I don't know, Ethan replied. I don't have a job. I don't have a house. I don't have any savings because I always thought my father would be there to bail me out. I hate that man, Brooke screamed. I hate him. He ruined our lives. No, Ethan said in a broken voice. We ruined our lives when we decided he didn't deserve our respect. It was the first time Ethan admitted they were wrong. But Brooke wasn't ready to accept responsibility. In her mind, I was the villain who had destroyed her perfect marriage. What she didn't know was that her marriage had never been perfect. It had been an illusion built on my silent sacrifices. That night, Brooke made a decision that would change everything. If she couldn't get Ethan to win back his father, then she would make his father pay publicly for what he had done to them. She opened her social media account and began to write a post that would go viral for all the wrong reasons. "My psycho father-in-law kicked us out of our house after ruining our wedding," the post began. "For years, he pretended to be poor to manipulate my husband, but in reality, he's a millionaire. Now that we're married, he decided to destroy our lives out of jealousy. My husband lost his job because of him, and now we have nowhere to live. This sick man can't accept that his son doesn't need him anymore." The post was accompanied by photos of Brooke crying and of their trashed house after the tantrum she had thrown. Within hours, the post had thousands of shares and comments. People were outraged by the evil father-in-law who had abandoned his son after his wedding. Brooke had presented herself as the perfect victim, a beautiful young bride destroyed by a jealous and vengeful older man. The comments were filled with insults toward me and words of support for Brooke. "What a horrible father-in-law," one person wrote. "He should be ashamed for treating his own son like that," another commented. Brooke read every comment with satisfaction, feeling vindicated by the support of strangers on the internet. She had gotten exactly what she wanted, to make me the public villain of her story. But Brooke made a fatal mistake. In her thirst for revenge, she had tagged my full name in the post, thinking I would be ashamed to see all the insults directed at me. What she didn't know was that by tagging my name, she had caused several people who actually knew me to see the post. The first to contact me was an old colleague. "Raymond," he wrote in a private message, "have you seen what your daughter-in-law is saying on social media? She's completely lying about you." I opened the app for the first time in weeks and read Brooke's post. Every word was a distortion of reality. Every accusation was an inversion of the facts. I sat in my hotel suite, scrolling through hundreds of comments from people insulting me without knowing the truth. Toxic father-in-law, bitter old man, psychopath, abusive. Each word was like a slap. But curiously, they didn't hurt as much as I thought they would. After everything I had been through with Ethan and Brooke, the insults of strangers seemed insignificant. What had bothered me was that Brooke had gotten exactly what she wanted. She had turned me into the monster of her story. She had taken my pain, my disappointment, my decision to protect myself, and had transformed it into a narrative where she was the innocent victim and I was the cruel villain. It was then that I decided it was time to tell my own side of the story. That night, I opened my social media account and started writing. Not a post full of rage or revenge, but a calm and honest account of what had really happened. "My name is Raymond, and I am the psycho father-in-law you've been talking about," I began. "I want to tell you the truth about what really happened." I wrote about adopting Ethan, about the years of sacrifice, about how I had worked multiple jobs to give him the best education. I explained how I had been quietly paying his expenses for years, from his house to his credit cards, from his job to his medical emergencies. I described Brooke's constant humiliations, Ethan's growing contempt, and finally the exclusion from his wedding. "I did not kick them out of the house," I wrote. "I am charging them rent for a house that I bought and paid for. I did not make Ethan lose his job. I simply stopped covering for his poor performance. I did not pretend to be poor to manipulate them. I kept my private life private because I wanted them to value me for who I am, not for what I have." But the most powerful part of my post was when I shared the recordings. Over the past few months, I had started recording conversations with Brooke and Ethan, not out of malice, but for protection. When someone constantly lies to you about what you said or did, recordings become your only defense. I had recorded Brooke insulting me. I had recorded Ethan telling me I didn't fit their image. I had recorded the phone call where Brooke screamed at me that I was a burden. I uploaded snippets of those recordings along with my post. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Within minutes, the comments began to change. "Oh my God, that daughter-in-law is horrible," someone wrote. "How can a son treat his father like that?" another commented. "This man is a saint for putting up with so much," a third said. But I wasn't finished. Over the next few days, I posted more evidence. Photos of receipts for everything I had paid for Ethan over the years, copies of bank statements showing the constant money transfers, documents proving that I had been the one to co-sign all his loans, screenshots of messages where Brooke insulted me and treated me with contempt. With each post, the narrative shifted more. People began to share my posts with captions like, "This is what happens when you don't value your parents," and An important lesson about the consequences of our actions. But the post that really changed everything was when I told the full story of Ethan's adoption. 28 years ago, I wrote, I adopted a 3-year-old boy who had been abandoned by his biological mother. He was a sad, scared child who needed love. I gave him that love unconditionally for decades. But unconditional love does not mean one must allow themselves to be treated without respect. Sometimes the most important lesson you can teach someone is that actions have consequences. That post went viral on its own. Thousands of people shared it, commented on it, saved it. Fathers all over the world identified with my story. Adult children began to reflect on how they treated their own parents. The conversation had completely changed. Brooke watched her narrative crumble in real time. The comments on her original post were now filled with people criticizing her for lying and manipulating the story. How could you lie like that about a man who sacrificed everything for you? They wrote. You should be ashamed, others told her. Desperate, Brooke did a live stream to defend herself from my attacks, but it was the worst mistake she could have made. Brooke started her live stream with tears in her eyes and a trembling voice. Hello, everyone, she said. I know many of you have seen my father-in-law's posts, and I want to clear things up. That man is lying about everything. There were only about 50 people watching at first, but the numbers started to grow rapidly as people shared the link. Raymond is not the victim he pretends to be, Brooke continued. He is a manipulative and controlling man who ruined our marriage because he can't accept that Ethan doesn't need him anymore. The live comments started pouring in, but they weren't what Brooke expected. Where's the proof of what you're saying? Someone wrote. Raymond's recordings sound very clear, another commented. Why don't you show evidence like he did? Brooke got nervous seeing that the comments were not supporting her as she had hoped. He manipulated those recordings, she shouted. He edited them to make me look bad. But as she was saying this, I was watching her broadcast from my hotel suite and decided it was time to make my appearance. I started my own live stream and wrote in Brooke's comments, Hello, Brooke, it's Raymond. Do you mind if I join the conversation? The comments exploded. He's here. This is going to be good. We'll finally hear both sides. Brooke turned pale when she saw my comment. No, she said with a trembling voice. I'm not going to give him a platform to continue lying about me. But the comments were now demanding that I be allowed to speak. Coward, they wrote. If you're telling the truth, you shouldn't be afraid. Let him speak. Fine, Brooke finally said. Let him join. That way, everyone can see what kind of person he really is. I accepted her invitation and appeared on the screen next to her. The contrast was stark. I was calm, well-dressed, in an elegant suite, while Brooke looked disheveled and desperate in a messy house. Hello, Brooke, I said in a serene voice. Thank you for allowing me to clear things up. Go ahead, she responded hostilely. Lie all you want. People already know the truth about you. The truth, I said, is that you have been insulting me for months, and I have the recordings to prove it. Would you like me to play them here live for everyone to hear? Brooke turned red. Those recordings are illegal. No, I replied calmly. In this country, it is legal to record conversations when you are a part of them, especially when you feel you are being harassed or threatened. The comments were filled with people asking me to play the recordings. Play them. We want to hear. The truth comes to light. I played the audio where Brooke screamed at me that I was a burden to Ethan, where she told me I had no dignity, where she insulted me for showing up at her wedding. The audio was clear and devastating. Brooke's voice filled with hatred and contempt, saying things no daughter-in-law should ever say to her husband's father. When the recording finished, Brooke was crying. That was out of context, she whispered. Out of context? I asked. In what context is it okay to tell a 71-year-old man that he is a burden and has no dignity? You provoked us, Brooke yelled, her face blotchy and red. You were always meddling in our marriage. Brooke, I said, keeping my calm. Can you give me one specific example of how I meddled in your marriage? She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She realized she couldn't give an example because one didn't exist. The only times I interacted with you, I continued, were when Ethan asked me for help with something, or when you invited me to dinner. I never showed up uninvited. I never gave unsolicited advice. I never criticized your relationship. My only mistake was existing. The comment section was now completely on my side. Brooke looks like a liar. This man is so dignified. How could they treat their father like that? The number of viewers had reached over 10,000. But you blackmailed us, Brooke said desperately. You took away our house and Ethan's job to force us to apologize to you. Brooke, I replied, I didn't take anything from you. I simply stopped paying for you. The house was mine from the beginning. Ethan's job was secured through my influence. The credit cards were paid by me. You never had anything of your own. I pulled out the documents and showed them to the camera. These are the original deeds to the house. As you can see, it was always in my name. These are the bank statements showing that I've been paying the mortgage for 5 years. These are the receipts for all the credit cards I've paid for Ethan. Brooke had no more arguments. But we were family, she said in a broken voice. Family? I repeated. Families invite each other to weddings, Brooke. Families treat each other with respect. You showed me that to you. I was not family. I was an unpaid employee. I looked straight at the camera. Ethan, I know you're watching. For 28 years, I was your father. I changed your diapers when you were a baby. I took you to the doctor when you were sick. I worked extra hours to pay for your college. I defended you when you got into trouble. But when the time came for you to defend me, you chose to humiliate me. That choice has consequences. Brooke tried to interrupt, but I raised my hand. I'm not finished, I told her. Brooke, you chose to see me as a threat instead of an ally. You chose to insult me instead of respecting me. You chose to lie about me on social media instead of accepting responsibility for your actions. Now you will live with the consequences of those choices. The comments were exploding with support. What a strong man. Brooke should be ashamed. Poetic justice. The number of viewers had climbed to 15,000 and was still growing. Do you know what the saddest part of all this is? I asked Brooke. She wiped her tears and stared at me, trembling. That I really wanted to love you, I said softly. When Ethan told me he had a girlfriend, I was thrilled. I thought I was finally going to have a daughter. I prepared special dinners for you. I bought you gifts. I tried to include you in all our family traditions. But you chose to see me as your enemy from day one. Brooke broke down crying openly. I didn't know. Of course you knew, I replied. You knew exactly what you were doing. And now everyone else knows, too. I ended the broadcast, leaving Brooke crying alone on the screen. Within minutes, clips of our conversation were circulating all over social media. I had publicly destroyed her, not with lies or manipulation, but simply by telling the truth. The live stream went viral within hours. The most shocking clips were shared millions of times with titles like Father-in-Law, Destroys Lying Daughter-in-Law with Facts, and the most elegant revenge in history. Brooke had been completely exposed as a cruel, manipulative liar, while I had emerged as a dignified man who had simply defended himself with the truth. The consequences for Brooke and Ethan were immediate and devastating. The boutique where Brooke worked fired her the next day. We can't have employees who generate this kind of controversy, her manager explained. Our clientele are elegant ladies who now see you as a contentious person. Brooke tried to explain that it had all been a misunderstanding, but it was too late. The video of her insulting me had been seen by millions of people, including the wealthy clients of the store. Ethan, for his part, arrived at work to find a termination letter on his desk. Mr. Harrison had given him a 2-week grace period, but after the public exposure, he couldn't keep him on, even out of respect for me. Ethan, Mr. Harrison told him when they met in his office, after what happened last night, several clients have called to say they don't want to work with someone who treats his father that way. I'm sorry, but your employment here ends today. But social media wasn't done with them. Users began to investigate more about their lives, discovering inconsistencies in the stories Brooke had told. Someone found old posts where Brooke bragged about the expensive gifts Ethan gave her, gifts they now knew I had paid for. Others discovered that the couple had been living a lifestyle far beyond their actual means. The hashtag Team Raymond started trending worldwide. Men and women of all ages shared their own stories about ungrateful children or toxic in-laws, fathers who had been excluded from weddings, parents who had been treated with contempt, people who had sacrificed everything for their families only to be abandoned when they were no longer useful. My story had struck a very sensitive chord with millions. Meanwhile, I was in my hotel suite watching everything unfold with a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. I had gotten justice. I had cleared my name. I had made my point, but I had also lost my son forever. The relationship between Ethan and me was broken in a way that could probably never be repaired. Samuel came to visit me that afternoon with more legal papers. Raymond, he said, Ethan and Brooke have been trying to contact me. They want to negotiate. Negotiate what? I asked, my voice cold. They want you to give them back the house and drop the legal claims you have against them for defamation. In return, they promise to apologize publicly and stay out of your life forever. I laughed bitterly. They want to negotiate now, after calling me a psychopath and a liar in front of millions of people? They're desperate, Samuel explained. They have no job, no house, no money. Brooke is receiving death threats on social media and Ethan is having panic attacks. Panic attacks? I asked, feeling a small pang despite myself. Yes, Samuel confirmed. Apparently, he can't leave the house without people recognizing him and confronting him about how he treated you. Yesterday, an elderly lady slapped him in the supermarket, shouting that he was a disgrace as a son. For a moment, I felt something akin to compassion. After all, Ethan was still the boy I had raised, the one I had comforted during nightmares and celebrated his first steps. But then I remembered his disgusted face when he kicked me out of his wedding, and the compassion vanished. Consequences of their actions, I murmured. They chose this path. What do you want me to tell them? Samuel asked. Tell them the house is mine and will remain mine. If they want to continue living there, they can pay the full rent of $3,000 a month. If they can't afford it, they have to move out. As for the defamation lawsuits, those will proceed until I receive a full public apology and compensation for the damage to my reputation. Samuel left, and I was alone with my thoughts. The truth was, I no longer needed the rent money or the legal compensation. I had more money than I could spend in several lifetimes. But I needed Ethan and Brooke to understand that actions have a price, that you can't treat people like trash and expect no consequences. That night, Ethan finally managed to get through to me. He had gotten my hotel number and had called repeatedly until I agreed to answer. Dad, he said in a broken voice, please, we have to talk. We already talked, I replied. At the door of the wedding venue. You told me I didn't fit your image. Dad, please, I was confused. Brooke filled my head with crazy ideas. Ethan, I interrupted him. Brooke didn't put a gun to your head to make you kick me out of your wedding. That decision was yours. Brooke didn't force you to treat me with contempt for months. Those were your decisions. But I didn't know you had money, he said desperately. If I had known, I would never have treated you like that. Those words were like a stab to the heart. Do you hear what you're saying, Ethan? You're telling me you would have treated me better if you had known I had money? What about treating me well because I'm your father? What about respecting me because I sacrificed my life for you? Ethan fell silent, finally understanding the magnitude of what he had revealed. I didn't mean that. Yes, you did, I replied. And that is exactly why our relationship is over. Because for you, my value as a person was determined by what I could do for you, not by who I am. What do I have to do for you to forgive me? He asked, crying. Nothing, I answered sadly. There is nothing you can do, Ethan. Forgiveness is given to people who make mistakes, not to those who reveal their true character. You showed me who you really are when you thought you were safe to despise me. Now you have to live with being that person. I hung up the phone, and for the first time since this whole situation began, I cried. Not for the loss of money or the house or status, but for the loss of the son I thought I had raised, who had never really existed. 6 months later, my life had completely changed. I had moved into a beautiful apartment in Geneva, near the properties I had inherited from my father. Europe welcomed me with open arms, a continent where no one knew my viral story, where I could walk the streets without being recognized, where I could start over at 71. Samuel managed my legal affairs from the States. Ethan and Brooke had finally lost the house, unable to pay the $3,000 rent. They had moved into a small apartment in a modest neighborhood, a far cry from the life of fake luxury they had been living. Ethan had found a job as a technician in a small company, earning a fraction of what he used to. Brooke was working in a call center, the only place that would hire her after her reputation was destroyed online. The defamation lawsuit had succeeded. The judge had ruled in my favor, ordering Brooke to pay considerable compensation and issue a formal public apology. The apology had been brief and clearly forced, but legally sufficient. I apologized to Raymond for the false statements I made about him on social media. I acknowledged that my claims were incorrect and caused damage to his reputation. I deeply regret my behavior. I donated the compensation money entirely to organizations that helped single fathers and adoptive families. I didn't need their money, but they needed to learn that lying publicly about someone has a real cost. During these months, I had received thousands of messages from people all over the world. Fathers who had been inspired by my story to set boundaries with abusive children. Fathers-in-law who had found the courage to stand up to disrespectful daughters-in-law. Older men who had decided to stop living for others and start living for themselves. One of the letters that touched me the most was from a man named Javier from Colombia. "Mr. Raymond," he wrote, "your story saved my life. For 15 years, I swallowed the contempt of my son and daughter-in-law, believing it was my duty as a father to endure everything for love. After seeing your story, I realized that love does not mean allowing abuse. Thank you for teaching me that fathers deserve respect too." I had started writing a book about my experience, not for revenge or to make more money, but because I realized my story had touched on something universal. Millions of men had seen themselves reflected in my experiences, and I thought that maybe my full story could help others recognize and escape toxic relationships. The book would be called "I Retired from Fatherhood," and it would be dedicated to all the men who had sacrificed their identity for love and who needed to remember that they deserved to be treated with dignity. Ethan had tried to contact me several times during those months. Letters sent through Samuel, messages through mutual acquaintances. He had even traveled to Geneva once to look for me, but I remained firm in my decision. I had closed that door forever. The last letter I received from him had been particularly painful. "Dad," he wrote, "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want you to know that I realize everything I did wrong. Brooke and I divorced. She could never get over the public humiliation and ended up blaming me for everything. Now I'm alone, and I understand what I lost. I didn't just lose a father. I lost the only person who truly loved me unconditionally. I know it's too late, but I wanted you to know that I regret every cruel word, every moment of contempt for kicking you out of my wedding. I'm not asking you to forgive me, just for you to know that I understand. You were the best father anyone could have had, and I was too stupid to value you." I read that letter several times, feeling a mixture of sadness and relief. Sadness because it was clear that Ethan had finally understood the magnitude of what he had lost, but also relief because his understanding validated my decisions. I hadn't been cruel or vengeful. I had simply defended my dignity and established consequences for abuse. In my new life in Geneva, I found a peace I hadn't felt in decades. I had time to read, to travel, to make new friends who valued me for who I was. I had started taking painting classes, something I had always wanted to do but never had time for because I was too busy living for Ethan. I had also started volunteering with an organization that helped older men who had been abandoned by their families. My story gave them hope, showed them that it was possible to rebuild a life after family rejection, that self-worth was more valuable than maintaining toxic relationships. One afternoon, while strolling through a park, I reflected on the entire journey, from adopting a 3-year-old boy to the decision to retire from fatherhood at 71. It had been a long and painful journey, but also a liberating one. I did not regret adopting Ethan. I had given him love, education, opportunities he wouldn't have had otherwise. I did not regret the sacrifices I had made during his childhood and adolescence, because those were acts of genuine love for a child who needed them. But I also did not regret walking away when he became an adult who treated me with contempt. I had learned a fundamental lesson. Unconditional love does not mean accepting unconditional abuse. There was a difference between loving someone and allowing them to destroy you in the name of that love. One evening, my phone vibrated with a message from Samuel. "Raymond," he wrote, "Ethan contacted me again. He says he's in therapy and that he understands everything he did wrong. He's asking if there's any chance of reconciliation." I read the message and smiled sadly. I replied, "Tell him I'm glad to know he's working on himself. But some doors, once closed, do not reopen. I wish him the best in his new life." It was the truth. I wished Ethan the best, but no longer from the position of his father. That man, the one who had lived for him for decades, no longer existed. In his place, a new Raymond had been born, a 71-year-old man who had learned that it is never too late to choose dignity over convenience, self-respect over toxic love. As the sun set over Geneva, I thought of the phrase that had become my mantra: "I don't regret adopting him. I only regret not understanding sooner that kindness should never be practiced at the cost of self-destruction." I had finished my career as a father, but I had begun my life as a free man. And that, I discovered, was the best revenge of all. To live well, to live in peace, to finally live for myself.